Thank you, Elizabeth. Adela, you can do our next slide, please.
Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Sarah. Hello, everyone. My name is Adela. I am a NEADS students researcher. I will be going over the NEADS VA4A project, as well as I'll just tell you a little bit about what NEAD does as an organization. The National Educational Association of Disabled Students, NEADS, is a by and for cross-disability, cross-Canada charitable organization supporting full access to education and employment for disabled post-secondary and graduate students. NEADS is working across 3 strategic areas of debt reduction, experience in class and on campus, and employment. NEADS offers various events, resources, reports, financial assistance program, and opportunities for disabled students and graduates. To improve opportunities in higher education and the labor market for disabled students, we collaborate with post-secondary stakeholders, other non-governmental organizations, employers, disability services providers, and community members. We provide ongoing advice to Employment and Social Development Canada and provincial and territorial government, and work to promote government programs and services that support higher education for disabled students. Now, after that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the VA4A project. The Virtual Access for All project, also known as VA4A, is a 5-year project funded by Employment and Social Development Canada's Support for Student Learning Program. The Virtual Access for All project supports disabled students to successfully navigate the transition from post-secondary education. Since the beginning of this project in 2021, we have been connecting students with existing mentoring opportunities and resources, offered webinars on various topics related to accessibility, expanded our National Student Award Program, and funded our Accessibility Resilience Program. Disabled students often experience systemic barriers to education, which makes it more challenging for them to complete their education and may cause them to graduate with more debt. Projects such as this one play an important role in ensuring disabled students can successfully complete their studies and be a part of an inclusive economic recovery for all individuals.
Thank you so much, Frank, Mohammed, Elizabeth, and Adela, for your help in opening this month's second Virtual Access for All webinar. We're good to go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Thank you as well to Alan, who's providing support in the background today. I'm thrilled to be facilitating this panel today. It's shaping up to be a wonderful and important dialogue. But before we jump into that, I should introduce myself. So the slide on the screen currently has a blue background with a circular headshot of myself in the middle. And my name is Sarah Shimlansky. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a white, queer, disabled, neurodivergent woman residing on the traditional, unceded, and unsurrendered lands of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation. Today, I'm wearing a dark blue blazer with white polka dots, and I have brown hair and glasses. I'm a researcher at NEADS and an undergraduate student at Carleton University. In my first year of university, I was diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, an invisible and rare connective tissue disorder. Being diagnosed with an invisible chronic illness in my first year of university had a profound impact on every area of my life, and I've learned a lot in the years since. Disability rights, advocacy, and accessibility have become a passion of mine, and I have a particular interest in raising awareness and discussion surrounding invisible disabilities. As such, I feel incredibly excited and privileged to be facilitating this panel here today. Before we jump into the questions, why don't we have our wonderful panelists introduce themselves with the next slide, please. Thank you. This slide features a blue background with a circular headshot of each panelist. Alan, why don't you start us off, please?
Great, thank you, Sarah. My name is Alan Jeans. I go by the pronouns he, him. I'm coming to you today from the territories of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee, now known as Kingston, Ontario. I am a Caucasian male with dark hair and facial hair. Today I'm wearing a blue sweater over a polka dot white shirt and a tie that's yellow with blue stripes. At Queen's University, I'm the manager of Queen's Student Accessibility Services, but I'm also a PhD student in education at Queen's University as well. Thank you for having me here today, and I'm looking forward to this discussion.
Thank you, Alan. We're very excited you could join us today. Anna, could you please go next?
Sure, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Anna. My pronouns are they, she. I am a queer, DC, disabled advocate and writer, and I live with ankylosing spondylitis and fibromyalgia, two chronic pain conditions, and I also live with a couple mental illnesses, including premenstrual dysphoric disorder and anxiety. And I recently graduated from McMaster University with a Bachelor of Arts in English, and I'm excited to be here today.
We're excited you could join us, Anna. Thank you so much. Kaylee, can you please finish off our introductions today?
Absolutely, happy to. So hi, everybody. My name is Kaylee Hodgson. I go by she, her pronouns. Today, I'm wearing a high-necked white shirt with a brown knit cardigan. I have short brown hair. I am a queer neurodivergent disabled person, and I got diagnosed officially with autism about 2 days ago, actually. So funny timing on that. I'm awaiting a diagnosis for what I believe is Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, but the symptoms have been affecting me throughout my life. I graduated in 2022 with a Bachelor of Community Rehabilitation Disability Studies from the University of Calgary. And I am about to walk the stage to receive my Master of Public Policy, also from the University of Calgary. Currently, I work in health policy with the Government of Alberta, and I'm really excited to be here today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kaylee. We're so excited you're here. So it's time to jump into our first question. And our first question is a little bit of a doozy today. It's a bit long, but I thought, I don't know, might be fun to start off with a more complicated one to get the discussion going. So our topic today is invisible disabilities. Not everyone with what we call invisible disabilities, what we're calling invisible disabilities today, identify as disabled. And I found this especially true for some individuals with chronic illnesses, especially. Disabled as an identity and a label is a very complex, multifaceted topic that we don't have time to delve into today. But I was wondering if you might share some of your thoughts on the topic of identifying as disabled. In particular, why do you think students in post-secondary education might hesitate to identify themselves as disabled, either to themselves and or to others? And do you think that this difference in identity or label might prevent some students from pursuing services or accommodations that could help them because they're often targeted at disabled students or offered by disability centers, and they might not feel they apply to them? Alan, why don't you get us started with this question today, if you don't mind?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Starting me off easy with the easy questions. This is really interesting, and I'll speak first from my personal experience. So I identify as neurodivergent. I'm an individual with Tourette Syndrome Plus, and that comes with ADHD and anxiety disorder and some other things thrown in there for fun. From my experience, I went through, it wasn't until late in life that I was diagnosed with Tourette syndrome. I was in my early 20s, but I'd known since I was in my adolescence that there was a something, that something was up. As I said, it was when I was in my 20s, and at that point, I thought, okay, I have Tourette syndrome. What does that mean? I never identified myself within the disability community. I didn't connect. I didn't see myself as having a disability because I looked at how that was impacting my life, and And I didn't feel that it was having an impact on my life. It wasn't until I was in my early 30s that I discovered there was a plus to Tourette syndrome, that there was such thing as Tourette Syndrome Plus. And then I started to understand, oh, ADHD, anxiety disorder, and although those are self-realized portions of myself, that being they're not formally diagnosed, which I don't believe that I need to move forward with that diagnosis. I know that as a part of myself. I identify that as part of myself. So that started to make sense. And then I remember very vividly the moment during my master's of giving a presentation on what I was researching. And for the very first time, I said, I identify as a person with a disability. And I remember it sort of landed on me like a really baggy sweater. It didn't make sense. I just thought, this feels strange. And since then I've gone through person with a disability. I identified as a disabled person for a while. And then I started to think, I don't know that fits me. And now identify as the label of neurodivergent. And it's only now that I'm starting to really engage with understanding ADHD and understanding what that means to me, that I'm starting to look and say, wait a second, there are parts of my life that are really impacted by the ADHD. That's interesting. So after a lot of exploration, it's only now that I'm coming to an idea that, wait a second, this really does impact me in a way that I'd never really been aware of before. From my position, and I'll speak a little bit about my role as a manager of an accessibility services office. I do see students all the time who say, well, but I don't have a disability. I just need accommodations because of these things. And I think it's really important to understand that identity is very, very important, and it's very individualized, and it means something to the person, and it needs to come from that person. Offices like mine have shifted from disability services office to accessibility services offices over in the last decade or so. And I think there's a lot more work now that we have a name change. There's a lot more work underneath to explore the processes, to make sure the processes are meeting with accessibility as well. But I'll leave my thoughts there for right now. I could talk a whole lot more on that, but I'll leave my thoughts there and hand it over to one of my other panelists.
Thank you so much, Alan. Those are some excellent points. I especially appreciate the sharing of your personal story, as well as the fact that they've changed the name to Accessibilities Center Services instead of Disability Services, and the change that you saw with that. That was very interesting. Kaylee, do you have anything you want to add to this?
Yeah, I definitely have a thought or two, which will not be a surprise to anybody who knows me. I always have a thought or two to share. I got pretty lucky with my undergrad in disability studies because a lot of it focused on the aspect of identity and self-identity. So as I was exploring a lot of the academic literature, I realized my own personal biases with the connotation of the word disability, of the word disabled, of the differences between person first language, so person with autism, versus identity first language, autistic person. Those two phrases have very different connotations to most people. And I just hadn't spent enough time with disabled people to realize my own biases. So my opinion is that the word disabled has such a connotation and such a baggage to it that people think, maybe I'm not bad enough to call myself disabled. My condition isn't serious enough for me to be disabled because I can still push myself and function. But part of the issue of invisible disability especially is that you don't realize what isn't normal until one day somebody tells you, hey, by the way, did you know that the normal amount of pain to be in every day is 0? That was news to me a couple months ago, and I've been identifying as disabled for a few years now. So it's an interesting kind of dance of what does that word mean to me? What do I personally need to unpack about this label? And why do I have such a hard time identifying with disabled? Do I view disability as a bad thing? Do I not want to associate myself with that? Why is that if it's supposed to be this morally neutral adjective? So it's a really nuanced and complicated discussion that I feel like a lot of people just don't have the emotional bandwidth to process, especially in university. It's hard enough without being disabled.
Absolutely. I've definitely experienced a lot of that as well. Those thoughts are not unfamiliar. And that's a really great point about having that emotional bandwidth to process these topics. It's definitely something to keep in mind when thinking about this. Anna, do you want to close out the discussion from this question?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's an interesting question because in my experience, I had mental illnesses before I kind of had physical conditions. And when I was only dealing with my mental illnesses, which did impact my ability to be in school and my functionality overall, I still didn't identify as disabled. But once my chronic pain conditions began impacting my functionality in more apparent ways, that's when I kind of started identifying as disabled. And I know that a lot of people, that is their understanding of disabled, like when it's, physically apparent. And I think it's interesting thinking about invisible disabilities because yes, it is invisible to other people, but it can also kind of be invisible to yourself in some ways. It's that whole idea of, external and internalized ableism, which isn't necessarily like something with malicious intent or anything. It's just something we've been conditioned with. And even though I was seeking accommodations in first year of university, and at that point, my chronic pain conditions did not progress yet to the point where I identified as disabled. My issue was largely my mental illnesses. I was seeking accommodations and accessibility services at the university, but I wasn't identifying as disabled. And I think back now and I'm like, that's kind of odd, but that was just my understanding of it. And I think it does come from, societal ableism, also not wanting to be put into a box and being seen as just a disabled person, because unfortunately there are a lot of negative connotations to that. I mean, I think change is brewing and people are starting to recognize it, but that is the truth. And it is hard to identify as disabled initially when, like Kaylee was saying, like if you don't really know any other disabled people and it's just you, it feels weird. So I think that stops a lot of post-secondary students from identifying as disabled, just because, they're still figuring out their identity in so many other ways, but to have such a big thing like this might be overwhelming. And like Alan said, I feel like every disabled person who does identify as disabled kind of has to come to it themselves, because in my experience, I have ankylosing spondylitis, a type of inflammatory arthritis, and fibromyalgia. And my mother also has arthritis and fibromyalgia, but she doesn't identify as disabled. And it's just interesting to see that juxtaposition. So I think it is something that everyone comes to themselves. And I think that might be what stops people from identifying as disabled.
Thank you so much for sharing, Anna. So many wonderful points there. Internalized ableism is such a complicated topic, and it's so true that it's such a personal journey. Everyone comes to identify at their own pace, has a lot of different thoughts that are behind it. It's so personal. It's different for everyone. Thank you for sharing your personal experiences with the topic. We're going to go on to the next one. It's a little bit shorter, but potentially not any less complex. Have you ever hesitated to seek out support or request accommodations due to the invisible nature of your disability? Kaylee, can you start us off with this one?
I would be happy to, yeah. So this is kind of the story of my life. So like Anna, I've been mentally ill for a very, very long time, like my whole life. I don't really remember not being super, super anxious. I don't remember not having OCD. But I feel like people whose disabilities are more visible are more likely to be taken seriously. And for me, I'm already kind of teetering on the edge of not feeling so great at all times. So that this is something I've really had to work through with, you know, the help of my therapist and my doctor and my support system, because I am so crushed at the thought of not being believed, because I'm such a quote unquote high functioning person, that I feel like it's just not as likely to happen for me. So why bother asking? Or I can get by without it. But I often forget that most people don't have to get by. The accommodations are intended to help me get to a similar baseline so that there's like an equitable opportunity of functioning. But I've also had a number of bad experiences with medical professionals who have dismissed me, who have, you know, done the classic misogynist thing of not quite hysteria, but I went in for back and hip pain and the doctor diagnosed me with anxiety. And I'm like, this isn't news to me. This isn't why I'm here. You're not a psychiatrist. Can we not? Yeah, but it's been kind of an interesting process for me, realizing that the invisible nature of my disability doesn't automatically exclude me from being eligible for accommodations. It just means that maybe it's just going to take a sec, and that's okay. And that everyone has their own connotations, and it isn't a reflection on me. It's a reflection on the systems that we have put in place to define people as either disabled or not disabled. Another thing that I find is that a lot of invisible disabilities are dynamic conditions. So, I mean, where I live in Alberta, we get a lot of Chinooks. And as any other Albertans would know, Chinooks create pressure changes, which means that there is a migraine season in Alberta. So we are in the thick of migraine season right now. So I won't need accommodations all of the time for migraines. And I can't predict when there's going to be a Chinook, but I will need those accommodations nonetheless. So it's an interesting journey of both me learning that, yes, I am allowed to take up space. I am disabled enough to deserve the same access as everybody else, despite the invisible nature of my disability. And also realizing that somebody else's problem with me needing accommodations, that isn't my emotional burden to take on. That is a them problem. That is not a me problem. So it's been an interesting kind of process.
Thank you so much. So much amazing points there. It's a really good point about deserving to take up space and being a them problem and a reflection on the system, not ourselves. Awesome points. Anna, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. So I kind of touched on this a little bit, but seeking accommodations, I did seek accommodations initially just for, mental illnesses, which aren't visible to others. And I actually had to be encouraged by family members to be like, hey, look, you are struggling, and this is something that makes it more difficult for you to get by in school. If there are these services, why not seek them out? And I really had to come to terms with that and kind of convince myself that, kind of like what Kaylee was saying, like, I am worthy of these things. It's not a weird request. I'm not like swindling the system or something. It's something I genuinely need to get to the same point as other students so that I can also be successful. So I was hesitant to seek out support, but also another reason I was hesitant to seek out support was that it's a very vulnerable experience to kind of lay out your medical history for these people that you don't know, and for the school system to have it on record, to be like, hey, this is what I'm going through. This impacts my everyday life and I need help for it. Asking for help is always hard. And for me, especially, I've just always tried to not have to rely on others. It's just, that's how I was. And since becoming disabled, I've learned to ask for help when I need it. But that also applies to accommodations. It was difficult to kind of wrap my head around needing that. So I did hesitate to seek out support, but kind of, again, like what Kaylee was saying about having a dynamic disability, there are times when I'm doing okay and I can manage without the accommodations, but there are other times when, you know, symptoms are flaring up, my mental health isn't doing as great, and that's when I do need those accommodations. So to have those set up in place, I think it's worth it. And I say this to people all the time. I'm like, if you might need it at any point, it's better to have it as an option, even if you don't need it all the time. So those are some of the reasons I did initially hesitate to seek out accommodations.
Thanks, Anna. I definitely had similar conversations with my own family. Alan, do you have anything you want to add to this topic?
Yeah, there's a lot of great points Kaylee and Anna are making, and I just keep coming back to this theme. And I think Kaylee, you'd mentioned, you know, I'm not bad enough to, or disabled enough to call myself a disabled student, or you know, or you know, Anna, what you were saying about I'm worthy of accommodations. And I think, you know, Sarah, you were talking just before this question about the internalized ableism, and that's real. That is a real thing that exists. And yeah, so it's something that I felt as in terms of accommodations, and I realize that I'm potentially coming at this partly from a sense of privilege, and also potentially just from a sense of age. When I was doing my first undergrad, and it was in the mid-90s, I'm a little older than the rest of the panelists here. I definitely at that point should have been connecting with an accommodation office. I should have been connecting with counseling and seeking accommodations. But it did not. It potentially existed at my university, but it was not easy to find if it did exist. Since then, all my you know, when I did a Bachelor of Education in Vancouver, and I did a Master's of Education, and now in my PhD, I haven't sought accommodations. That partly privilege, also partly, you know, I've been leveraging the notion of being a mature student to be able to connect with my professor and say, hey, how about some leniency and flexibility? So I've been leveraging that, and I'm aware that comes with privilege as well. But when it comes to the idea of hidden disability, I'll just point out as well, you know, Tourette syndrome is probably not hidden for me. People can see what's going on. People can see the movement. So that's not the hidden piece. For me, the hidden piece is the ADHD. And it's only now that I'm really starting to explore that and understand that, and even interrogate my own biases that I've been carrying about ADHD for a very long time. And I'll just put a plug in for a book I recently read, which is Devon Price's Unmasking Autism, which is fantastic, and talking about ADHD and autism as sister diagnoses. And that notion of that really helped me to understand how much internalized ableism I'm dealing with, how much bias I'm dealing with about ADHD, and also how much I mask what that means, especially being in a professional role where certain expectations are expected of me. Yeah, I'll leave it there. Thanks. This is a really good question.
Thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us, Alan. Very helpful. And keeping an eye on the time. So we're actually going to skip ahead to question 6. It's going to be the last question we do. So question 6, one more slide, please. Thank you. Question 6 to wrap up our discussion is, what advice would you give a student entering post-secondary education with an invisible disability, or students who are newly diagnosed with one? Anna, do you want to go first on this one?
Yeah, sure. So the advice I would give is to seek out the accessibility center at school. I know that might be very daunting. I know it was for me because I couldn't find any of their information or like an email or something online. I had to call a phone number, and, you know, being a person with anxiety, that was just really overwhelming, especially at that point in my life. But it was worth it having those accommodations. And at that time, I didn't know I would also become physically disabled to the extent that I am. Like, I use a cane permanently, I use a walker frequently. I didn't know I would get to that point. And having those accommodations set up from the get-go really helped me. But in addition to that, I'd say always try and connect with your professors or your TAs or whoever is like your instructor at like the beginning of the semester, and let them know that you do have accommodations in place. I mean, like, they will get notice of that, but sometimes the accommodations aren't set up exactly for what you might need in that class specifically. So also having that sort of personal relationship, or even just having had a discussion with that instructor, you can sometimes talk to them personally without going through your accommodations or going through the accessibility office. You can talk to them and be like, hey, I need like virtual access for this one class because, you know, I've got an infusion or something. And if you go through the accessibility office, that might take longer, or they might have some, you know, bureaucratic issues with it, and they can't really go about it that way. But if you talk to your professor personally, that might go better. I mean, I personally experienced this in my last year of my undergrad, where I was requesting virtual access because I was a commuter student and I couldn't get to campus as frequently as needed. And the accessibility office wasn't able to provide that for me. They said, we can grant you accommodations as long as you were on campus. But I was like, my issue is I can't get to campus as much. But talking to my professor, they were able to do that personally for me. So it's just about, it's more work, which does suck. It's personal, you know, emotional and like admin sort of labor to take on, but it is really helpful to make those connections with the accessibility office and with each instructor.
Thank you so much, Anna. So much useful advice there. Kaylee, do you want to go next?
Yeah, for sure. So Anna took a lot of the words right out of my mouth for what I would have said in regards to formal accommodations, but my personal experience, I have never received formal accommodations, even though I certainly could have used them. They would have made my life a lot nicer, just because I've been going through this process since starting undergrad, and because I'm a highly masking individual, so I'm able to kind of be under the radar. And there are certain benefits to that. I'm going to be honest about that. There are certain benefits granted to me because I have that privilege of being able to hide my disability. It takes its toll. It's not always worth it. So sometimes you do need to do a bit of a cost benefit. And the one thing I will say that not a lot of people say, they don't tell you this at the doctor's office when you're handed a piece of paper with the name of this condition on it that you don't know anything about. It's okay to grieve, right? Like, disability is neutral. It's, you know, there are a lot of things that I appreciate about myself because I am disabled. There's a lot of empathy that I'm able to tap into because I am disabled and I can relate to other disabled people. But it's okay to grieve for the expectations that you've had for yourself. It's okay to grieve for what you thought your life would look like and what it's like now. It's okay to grieve the friendship that you might lose because you are too fatigued to go out. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be angry. I know I'm speaking for myself, but my partner is also disabled. We all have days where being disabled just sucks. And it's not even the high pain days. Sometimes it's the straw that broke the camel's back, right? Like, you'll be going about your day and then your joint will slip out of place. And then it's like everything kind of comes crashing down, and that's okay. It's important to surround yourself with the people who you know are going to be supportive. And there's a Dr. Seuss quote, which is so cliche, but it's so true. Those who mind don't matter, and those who matter don't mind. So the right people will accommodate you. The right people will be there for you through thick and thin. It's okay. And I mean, I never got formal accommodations. I see the value of them. So I didn't seek them out because of the emotional fear that I had of being turned back, of not being believed, and because I didn't have a formal diagnosis. I still don't. And that can be a huge barrier for a lot of people. So I highly recommend trying to get accommodations, but if you can't, you know, it's not ideal, but it's okay. It happens, and it's okay to have whatever feelings you're having about the situation. It's a complicated thing. And I mean, the disabled community, whether or not you identify as disabled, if you have a condition that impacts your day-to-day life, we're here for you. We're a family.
Thank you so much, Kaylee. I definitely agree with so much of that. I got chills that it's okay to grieve. It's so true. It's hard, but it's true. Alan, do you want to finish us off on this one, please?
Oh, that's so fantastic, Kaylee. Those words are just great, and I love the idea of, you know, we're a family. You know, we're the disabled community it really is a lovely group of people. I guess I'll get sort of really practical in what I'll say. If you are looking to go to a university, connect with and you want to get accommodations in place, connect with the Accessibility Services Office early. Connect as early as you possibly can. A lot of times what we see is that students wait until they get to university in the fall. And this year we will have been doing intake for about 1,000 students. And that takes time. So if you wait until you arrive at university, it may not be until you're, you know, well into your first term at university before accommodations are in place. So connect early, and reach out and have those discussions. And if you or a disabled family member or anybody is thinking of going to a university and you're trying to decide which university to go to, reach out and connect with the Accessibility Services Office. Make that part of your decision making around which university you want to attend. I know I meet with prospective students all the time. That doesn't mean that I'm able to say, great, when you arrive, here's a guarantee of the accommodations that you will get, or here's what your accommodation plan will look like. We can't do that until a student's actually registered and we know what classes, and there's a lot of factors that go into it. But you can definitely get a sense of what that would look like. You can ask those detailed questions, and you know, we can talk about, well, here's what the accommodations look like, and here's some of the technology that we might have available. So that's my big recommendation is connect with the office and connect early and just have those discussions. And I know I can say that there is a shift. There's a shift happening from a medical understanding of disability, and we need your documentation signed by the correct doctor at the correct time, and you need to have that when you start. And that shift is slowly moving to say, come connect with us. I'll speak for myself at Queen's. Students arrive and they say, well, I don't have a diagnosis. I'm in the process of getting one. I'm doing assessments and we'll say, great, let's get you accommodations in place on an interim basis while you're getting everything sorted out. Let's make sure you're supported and connected. And then when you get the assessment, bring it back and we'll be able to discuss what that might look like, and we can go forward with permanent things. So we always want to make sure we're hearing the student for where they are. And if they don't have the documentation there at that very moment, great, well, let's still support you while you're going through that. Let's not leave you hanging with your accommodations and your classes. So.
Thank you so much, Alan. All right, it's time to wrap up our discussion. Thank you so much, Alan, Anna, and Kaylee, for your wonderful insights on the topic of invisible disabilities. I'm going to open up the floor to let audience members ask questions if they need, but before we do that, I'd like to acknowledge that we can't ask our interpreters and captioners to stay past the hour, so thank you so much, Tyler and Janice, our interpreters, and Shayla, our captioner, for all your help today making our event more accessible. Now, to ask a question, you can use the chat box, send a question directly to myself or Frank Smith, or you can use the Zoom function to raise your hand. You're also welcome to email any questions or comments to myself at sarah.shemliansky@neads.ca after the event. Laura, I see your hand up. Go ahead. You're muted.
I always do that. I tend to get a little overstimulated, and it's difficult for me when I'm as excited as I feel right now. And you know, I got to say, this has been wonderful. My name's Laura Braun. I'm a disabilities coordinator, and I work down the hall from Frank Smith. And I've been a disabilities coordinator for many years at Carleton University. And this is just a breath of fresh air because I've been doing more reading. I mean, I'm also identify as a mature person, and there's been a lot of changes. Alan, you referred to the early 90s and the late 80s. That's when I was doing my undergraduate degree. And it's interesting to see the cycle. I don't want to hog the time. I just want to say thank you very much. I appreciate it very much. I identify as a person with a disability, and I've been working with students with disabilities for many, many years. And these things are right on, and I've never heard this in a panel before. I wonder if we could have like a repeat, and I'll try to get more people to listen to it. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Linda.
Okay, I'm Sarah. I'm with Linda. I have disabilities, but have any of you had the issue where someone asked you for documentation and you have a doctor that kind of refuses to help diagnose the rest of the disability for your accommodations?
I can jump in. So for me, yes and no. I've been going through the process. I've been denied by, I think, 3 specialists by now, just because they won't see people with my symptoms, even though that is under the purview of their specialty, and getting the piece of paper will help me get accommodations. So I've experienced roadblocks in a different capacity, but in a similar vein. So that's not, yeah, you're not alone in that. That's a common issue, unfortunately.
Is there any way around that? Do you know?
In terms of specialists in Alberta, no. We have a whole primary care crisis, which I know too much about because of my job in health policy with the government of Alberta. I could go on about that, but we're running out of time. As far as I'm aware, you just need to keep being stubborn. You need to stick up for yourself. Bring your binder of medical stuff. Have an app that tracks your symptoms so you have hard data. Doctors love data. They don't really like listening to feelings, but they love data. So bring the data, track your symptoms, and it's a slog, and I get it. And I wish I had better advice than just be stubborn and use up your valuable energy. But sometimes that is just what needs to happen.
Yeah, because I have the issue of some of the doctors say, "Oh, you're not disabled enough," and then they just stop.
Yeah, that's hard, and I'm sorry you're going through that. But really, like, if you look at the social model of disability, if you look at critical disability theory, there's no such thing as disabled enough.
Yes.
That is, if it impacts your life and you are unable to do certain things, you are disabled from doing certain things, you are disabled enough.
To jump in quickly, I think another thing is to connect with other people who have those conditions, because I've learned a lot from other people who have AS and fibro, and they've, especially people who are like in the same province or like near my city, they've told me, hey, avoid this rheumatologist. They suck. Go to this one. They've been so helpful for me.
Fibro is the one they actually figured I was mixed diagnosed with mild forest cerebral palsy because I fit in all 4 categories of it a little bit. Yeah.
Thank you for everyone who answered that. I hope that those answers helped. Alex, I believe, raised their hand next. Can you go ahead?
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you so much for this event. And I have kind of like a question, but feel free to like not answer if it's like too big for this specific meeting. I've been like diagnosed with chronic, like a couple of chronic illnesses 3 years ago, and I had to stop school. I've had a lot, like I'm going through a lot of fatigue, a lot of chronic pain, and I'm like in the middle of like rehabilitation to like hopefully go back to school and finish school and get my diploma. And like all the physical part, I was able to get like the support that I need and everything, but like on a mental health side of it, like I have a lot of support. I'm really blessed to have like a good support system in my personal life, but I'm feeling like the pressure of like I identify as a disabled person because like it's really affecting every single day of my life. And you know, we live like in a capitalistic society where we're supposed to perform, we're supposed to be able to be there full time when you have a job, when you're at school. And it kind of makes me feel like unwanted, like maybe there's like no place for me like in the like mainstream world. When I go to talk to specific people who understand what I'm going through, like it's easier, but like and this is only anxiety, right? Because I don't have a job right now. I'm not at school right now. But I just, it's hard for me to imagine like having a normal job, like just going to school, even with all the, I think school will be easier, you know, but when, you know, I'm going to have a job and I'm going to have a salary. And then if something happens and I'm not sure like about the discrimination, about, I don't know, sometimes it feels like the world is not made for us. And I'm having a lot of anxiety with that. And I wonder if you have like some tips about that. But again, it's a big thing, and if it's not relevant to this specific topic, feel free to answer somebody else's question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Alex, thank you so much. Thank you for being open about that. And as a person who I'd said, you know, as I was speaking, that during my first undergrad, I should have been connecting with counseling. I should have been connecting with accommodation. Anxiety was a huge part of my life. And you know, coming to what Kaylee was saying, I think it was you, Kaylee, who was saying, you know, that there's nobody tells you how much pain you should be in a day. Nobody tells you how much anxiety you should have in a day. It was normal for me. It was normal to wake up and wake up in the middle of the night with my eyes wide open, in absolute anxiety. It is difficult. It is very difficult, and it took me a long time to work through my own anxiety, and to come to terms with anxiety, and also, and this may sound a little bit strange, to make friends with anxiety, and to say it's okay. Oh, hello, friend, you're here today. Okay, great. I am, you know, I have a big old fancy job, you know, with a big old fancy title of manager. And if you'd asked me in my 20s if I thought that I could do a job like this, absolutely not. I would have said this is well beyond what I'm able to do. And yet here I am. So I don't know that that's as much of an answer, Alex, for you, but that's my way of saying it gets better, you know, and I really hope that you're connecting, and that you know that you know, there's a anxiety in the world, and anxiety within ourselves, but you are able to do things. You are able to go to school, and there are people like myself and like Laura, like my team, who are there to support and make sure that you're able to meet goals that you want to meet. So I hope that was helpful for you.
Yeah, thank you. I need to like, there is hope, and I can make friends with my anxiety. So I think I'll work on that instead of like stressing about a future that's not here yet. So yeah, thank you so much.
If I can just jump in for half a sec, what Alan said about making friends with your anxiety is so true. I've been in and out of therapy since I was like 12 for anxiety, amongst other things, anxiety and co. And a trick that my therapist taught me that's been super helpful is if you just imagine you've got like a little goblin on your shoulder.
Yes.
Because I'm not friends with my anxiety. We're fighting. Like, I'm anxious right now, and we are throwing hands in my mind. The making friends with it, that's just not me. I'm a bit more of like a fighty person. I'm very stubborn. I win or else. So just imagining my anxiety is this little like oozing goblin creature that sits on my shoulder and goes, "You're never going to be good enough." I can just go, "Shut up, ooze." And imagining it as a thing instead of just this intangible, ever-consuming dread, for me, that's been helpful. And you just learn to manage it better with time. It does get better. And psychiatric medications are a morally neutral tool. If they help you bring your baseline up to a better quality of life, great. They are a tool. It is what it is. There's Tylenol, right? Like, I take Tylenol for a headache if it works. I take antidepressants for anxiety. Like, it just is what it is. Medicine exists to help us. And if that's the path for you, if that helps you, phenomenal. If it doesn't, great. You're not alone, for sure.
Thank you so much. I think it's just hard sometimes to know what is the anxiety and what it is like the world is hard, and this is the truth of it. But I'll continue to explore that, and I am in therapy, and I'll continue to work on that. Thank you so much, and I'd like to let somebody else ask a question.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you, Alan and Kaylee, for your answers. Before we get to Anne, there was a question in the chat. Diane asked, how do you define disability in your life? It's a very big question, but if any of our panelists want to try and tackle that in a small amount of time that we have available, go for it.
Could I just preface it? The reason I'm asking that question?
Okay, yeah.
I'm a professor of disability studies at University of Manitoba. And I, of course, was a student with invisible chronic illnesses, studying in graduate studies. And I found the most helpful thing was to say, you know, it's not my condition that disables me, right? It is the barriers. It is the barriers, the attitudinal barriers in particular, that are the bane of my existence as a student, but also as a faculty now too. Mm-hmm. The barrier being my internalized ableism. I should be doing better. Yeah. And this is unacceptable. Yeah. The second one being, people don't seem to believe you when you say you need accommodations. How many times do I have to tell you, believe me, believe us? It becomes a moral question whether you have disability or not to a lot of faculty, staff, other students at the university. So I'm just wondering, folks, how are you defining disability? To me, I see it's just not much to do with me. I get my internal talk down, but it's these barriers, they keep flying up in front of me.
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it. First of all, is anybody here identify or see themselves the exact same way right now that they saw themselves when they were in grade 9? I don't think so, and so it's really important to understand that identity is forever changing, and my identity and relationship with what disability means is forever changing, and it will continue to forever change. And I think that's really, really important for me. Like I said, for me, you see my face moving all around, you see my shoulder twitching. Tourette syndrome is there. It's just a part of me. Why I made the shift from saying I'm a person with a disability to disabled person is I wanted to make it very, very clear that Tourette syndrome is coming with me. I've experienced being told, no, your disability is accepted here. We include you, only to make a vocal tick. And then people say, well, if you could just not make so much noise. Well, no. You included me. I come with this. So I think that's a really important piece. As far as the attitudinal barrier, it's bias is there. We all have bias. We all have bias about many things. Some people it's a simple bias of I see a green vegetable and I know I'm not going to like that. That's not me. I actually like vegetables. That's just an example. But so it can be that simple. It's just a shortcut. The issue is the unchecked bias. And I said before, and the reason my relationship with disability is changing now is I'm starting to look at my own personal unchecked bias about ADHD, something that I understand within myself, and I've had a lot of internalized ableism and internal and bias about what that means that I'm just now starting to sort through. And so I know that in the coming years, my understanding of disability and my connection with disability is going to be very different than what it is right now. One last thing I'll say is, for me, Tourette syndrome is it is what it is. It's never been a disabling factor. I'm only starting to now realize that ADHD has actually been a disabling factor, and I haven't realized it. It really is about the disability bumping up against the exterior piece. What is that? We talk about if a student has, for example, a disability when it comes to dysgraphia or dyscalculia, and that really impacts their ability with numbers, but they're doing all English courses. That disability may not actually, it still exists, it's still there, but it may not actually be a disabling factor within those areas where they're not engaging with numbers in that way. So the disability, Diane, as you were expressing it as a social piece, comes when the functional impact bumps up against the external piece within the environment. I'll hand it over in case Kaylee, Anna, I don't know if you wanted to jump in on that one.
I have nothing really to add. What you say about being partially contextually dependent is so true, especially for me because of how dynamic my disability is. It really depends. And I also have ADHD, and I didn't realize until very recently just how disabling it's been since I started medication, actually, and realized that most people can just function. So it is interesting hearing other people's perspectives and what's normal versus not normal. Yeah, for me, it's partially how I view the world, my own personal perspective, and how that's been impacted by my disabilities. It's just like being queer, right? Like I see straight couples on TV all the time and I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. I see people using the stairs all the time and I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. And that's kind of the cultural norm. So when I am out in public with my girlfriend, or if I am having troubles with stairs, it's that context that always just kind of reminds me, oh, right, this is a factor in my life.
Yeah, for me, I think I define disability as it's like a combination of the social model of disability, kind of a bit like you were saying, Diane, about attitudinal barriers, and also like other barriers that are caused by how society is set up. But part of it is also, I kind of see it as, does my condition here make what I'm trying to do more difficult? Like, are there no other aspects? Is it just like what I'm going through? For example, like with my chronic pain, if I'm just like trying to walk down a corridor or something and I'm struggling just due to pain and there aren't really any other factors, I would define that as, for me, like that's my disability that is causing these issues. But I know that might be different for other disabilities, and identifying them as disabilities and identifying as disabled, because pain is just, it really gets in the way of things. But yeah, I think that's kind of my approach. It's like a two-pronged approach to how I define disability. It's very personal for me, and I think it's very personal for everyone as well.
Thank you all for those wonderful contributions. We still have 2 hands up. We really need to wrap up, so we'll try and keep these really quick. Anne, if you want to ask your question. I can't hear you, Anne.
Very encouraged to hear the comments. Can you hear me now?
Yes, it's better.
Okay. Very encouraged to hear the comments from the panelists. And as a mature student that I was when I was attending my undergrad and my grad studies, I at first was reluctant to get the accommodations that were being offered to me, but I did. As a student who was well into her 60s, when I graduated, I felt that the younger students should be the ones who should be getting those services and not me, because I was so old. But I realized, because I had professors who were disabled themselves, and they told me, Anne, you need to get these accommodations so you can get your education, so you can get out there and tell these other people what it's like going through university as a person with multiple disabilities. So that's my take on this, but I'm very happy to hear the comments that I've heard today.
Thank you so much, Anne. We appreciate you being here and your comments. Camille, do you want to go ahead?
So I was in school last year as a mature student, and the thing that stopped me from going was just resources. So I had my family say they'll pay for school, and they have this thing, they don't talk about money. So I used all my savings for one semester and I had to withdraw. And part of that was, I don't want to deal with the system of OSAP and Ontario Disability Support Program, because the restrictions in OSAP and then the restrictions with the caseworker reviewing how much money you get from OSAP actually reduces the income you need to support yourself while you're funding your education and while you're funding your lifestyle and then your disability needs. So now I had to make this active approach of, I'm going to pay down my credit cards, use my credit cards, hoping my bank gives me a line of credit. And just doing that is not accessible as like, it's accessible for me for the resources I have based on what ability I'm able to do that's supporting my disability, but it's very, very isolating. So I really appreciate that this panel is, we want people to live their best lives as best they can with their disabilities, but we still have a system that doesn't support us, which is very, like, we have pockets of people that believe we should have these things, and then we have to prove to people who don't have them that we should have them, when we're just trying to live our best life. And that, I'm happy that I'm not alone, I'm not going crazy. It's just a system out there that's really, there's too many systems that are complex that just make me very frustrated. Like the way I have to figure out how to borrow money from a regular bank instead of the OSAP system. Because when I read the contract for disability and bursaries and then disability post-secondary education and they really monitor everything I do as if I'm not capable of making my own decisions, when I've been doing that since like I could talk. It's, yeah, so just that, like we need more conversations like this, because there's so much isolation, there's so much anxiety, there's so much fear, there's so much, like Anne talking about going to school as a mature student and feeling like she's too old to access disability benefits. I feel that too, and we should just equally feel accepted to be in the room. I don't know how we're supposed to bring that message in, but that's definitely, I'm happy I'm here. I saw it today on social media, and the fear I had before, it's a little smaller. I'm very happy the fear I had before is smaller.
If I can just add something real quick there, I have some pretty unique expertise in that system. I did my internship with the government of Alberta working in employment and financial services policy. So that was Alberta's long-term disability program, as well as income support for people who are temporarily or permanently unemployed. And I want to tell you, the culture shift is happening. And I'm not sure about Ontario, but in Alberta, the culture shift is happening. People are being believed. There is work happening to make the policies easier to follow for the staff so that more people can get the benefits that they deserve so that they can have the best quality of life possible. Unfortunately, it's a slow process. Like there's a phrase like moving at the speed of government, slower than molasses, slower than the slowest snail in the world, but it's happening. And there's a lot of really great people trying to make that work happen. It doesn't stop it from being any more frustrating right now, but I want to assure you that there are good people with experience like me who are trying to make things better for everybody. And I'm sorry that's an experience you've had, because that's beyond frustrating and demoralizing.
If I could just jump in here real quick, sorry, I'll try to keep it concise. Camille, I can really relate to your experience, especially I finally got approved for ODSP in my last semester of school. And because I was getting financial aid from OSAP, it really reduced the amount of ODSP I was allowed. And that was just very shocking and frustrating for me because I had no idea. But I think there are some ways that OSAP could still be helpful. I think there's still an option to like only accept grants and not loans. And similarly, when I was in school and getting OSAP, you do have to fill out some documentation for this, but they do give grants for disabled students. And that, I know that helped me a lot, especially to bridge that gap between like the finances of like trying to live as a disabled person and not being able to really work, but also being in school. So I know that did help me a lot. I'm sure there's other resources as well, and I'm sure NEADS can help with some of that stuff. But yeah, I just wanted to say that like OSAP could still be helpful in some ways. And I think it also depends a bit on the school. Like there might be some scholarships for disabled students. But again, like that kind of differs from place to place. But I really empathize with you. It is so hard being in school as a disabled person. And I'm so sorry that your experience has been like this, but I really hope that you can get back into school because it really is such a rewarding experience.
Yeah, so I thought grants would help, but grants are giving more money. So when grants give more money, ODSP sees it as not educational funding and reduce your check. They're digging at every dollar you get. They're not even letting OSAP be an exempt asset 100% no matter what OSAP does. Like you can't just apply for OSAP. You literally have to apply for OSAP, tell OSAP you have ODSP, then tell ODSP you have OSAP. Then ODSP goes through dollar for dollar, line by line, description by description, and reduces your healthcare benefit or my disability pays my rent every month. So that means my rent won't be paid if disability makes a decision. And it's just because, oh, I filled out my OSAP application because I was told as the bursaries and grants from disability as a student was supposed to help me. And when I actually read, so that's the thing, people don't read the contract. And when the contract changes, we don't know the new barrier. So then I'm making a decision because someone told me something 5 years ago when the contract was like that. And then reading the contract now, it's changed. So my strategy has to change, my approach has to change. And then people are still feeding me what they read before the contract changed, because it changes every single year. Every year the contract changes. And if you don't read it, you're going off of information that's no longer relevant to defend yourself all the time.
Thank you for your contributions and your comments and everything. I'm really sorry to kind of cut in here, everyone, but our time is very up. I'd like to thank everyone for your contributions, your comments, your questions, and thank you so much to our wonderful panelists, Alan, Kaylee, and Anna, for being here and for being willing to share your personal experiences. It's such an important topic, clearly, so many subtopics that could be talked about within this, such an important conversation. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here and helping. But we have to say goodbye now. So before we go, I'd just like to also thank my NEADS team that has been so helpful with making this event happen. Thank you to Adela, Mohammed, Elizabeth, Carly, Chloe, Frank, and Alan for everything you've done, both during the event and behind the scenes. And our interpreters have already had to leave, but I'm grateful to them as well, and to our captioner. And once again, if anyone has any questions, comments, or concerns that you'd like to share with us, please feel free to reach out to us. You can email me at sarah.shemlansky@neads.ca. We're happy to hear from you. We're happy to get feedback so that we can help improve and plan our future events. So with that said, I'd just like to say, have a wonderful day, everyone. And we can stop